Jefferson County, Alabama, a dark chapter of racial violence unfolded during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Lynchings, a brutal form of racial terrorism, were used to enforce white supremacy and suppress black communities. Historians estimate that over 150 African Americans were lynched in Alabama between 1877 and 1950, with Jefferson County accounting for 33 of those tragic acts.
I mean, it was a big day. It felt like the culmination of all of this work. It made it feel real, because we've been working on this project since 2020, and to see a tree actually get planted in the ground after talking about it for so many years and see it actually happen, and in such a beautiful way. You know, the tree was planted to honor Lewis Houston. He was the first one on the list. He was lynched there at Lynn Park, which I think was called Liberty Park, when he was lynched. And, you know, his story is, you know, it's tragic. I mean, there's evidence that was found before his lynching that he did not do it, and he was still lynched, and he was a young man, 21 years old, and the last thing he said before he was hanged was, "Jesus, take me home."
We want these trees to be a living monument to the victims. We think the idea of having a tree is basically more beautiful and more impactful than having a tombstone. And some of these people ended up died in places where they basically can't be memorialized, and that's part of the history too.
The goal of the Black Cherry Tree Project is to memorialize victims of racial terror, to construct legacies for people that had their legacies stripped from them, to create dialogue across our community that extends transgenerationally, to plant living memorials that will continue to grow well past our lives in order to inspire future generations to never forget the past, and use art as a vehicle to create conversation about racial reconciliation and what that truly means, and how we can reckon with our history as a community.
My name is Micah Althea Briggs, and I'm a visual artist. So I think that just encompasses everything visual, whether it's photography, videography, painting, illustration. I try not to limit it to anything.
And behind you is your portrait of the tragedy that was Elizabeth Lawrence's lynching. Could you kind of talk briefly about Elizabeth Lawrence's story first, before we get into the actual painting itself?
Yeah. I think what stood out to me about her story was the way she chose to stand up for what was right, regardless of the consequences that I believe she may have already knew she was gonna face. Elizabeth Lawrence, she was someone who I believe could have been like a very creative person. From what I was able to find, she was a teacher, a school teacher. And she was a mom. She was leaving school and was walking home, and some white children were throwing rocks at her. And she decided to confront them and tell them that what they were doing was not okay. In my mind, as a mother and as someone who teaches also, I kind of envisioned her possibly speaking to them in probably a gentle way, but also like a firm, kind of like teacher mom way. And she went home and she was killed. Her home was set on fire. I believe out of the various victims that we were able to choose from, her story was had the most details to it. But there was still a lot of missing pieces. And some of the other artists that we worked with, we kind of worked together to do research on her. And so some of us were able to create some theories, possibly, of the type of teacher she could have been. She possibly could have been a music teacher or an art teacher. We don't really know the specifics, but For what I connected to was the fact that she was a mother, and just the fact that she was able to stand on what she believed in, and she saw something that wasn't right and she decided to say something about it when she could have easily just kept going about her day and ignored what happened. Historically, as someone who went to art school, they force you to learn art history. And so one thing that always stood out to me was in a lot of European art, in a lot of the religious art, they use gold to create halos around the people to show that they were holy, or perhaps that they represented angel or some sort of a spirit. And so in a lot of my art, when I'm showing Black people, I like to put that gold halo around them to show the pureness and just the divine nature of us as a people. Her doing this, she had to have known that there was going to be a consequence, just off of the nature of this time period. I don't think that there probably wasn't a moment that it didn't cross her mind that something can happen to me for saying what I said. But part of when I was thinking about the title for this painting, I was thinking about the fire and how her home was burned down, and how after a fire happens, there's a layer of ash and soot, and then underneath sometimes there's still hot embers that, if triggered, can start a whole new fire. And I feel as though that's kind of where we are right now, which is why Black Cherry Tree Project is very important, why these conversations are very important, because if we're not careful, we can reignite those embers and start all new fires.
My name is Tara Lee, and I am a mixed media artist. I knew I was interested in an unknown, so I chose the first unknown victim. So at the time, he did not have a name. I remember this feeling, and then maybe through one of our Black Cherry Tree discussions or meetings, this point came up that an unknown can represent everyone, and there's something about that resonated with me. He was an innocent 25-year-old young man. He was getting on a train Mother's Day weekend, and he was mistaken for someone else who had been accused of bothering a white woman. So he had no idea what was happening to him. He was just a young guy going somewhere. I remember I'm seeing what I was reading about. I was imagining him getting on the train and his mom. My son was about the age Charlie was when he died. So my son, I think, was around 24 or so when I was working on this project. So I immediately thought about Charlie as a mom might think about her son. So that's where I personally became invested in Charlie as a person. How I thought about him was like a son. Not a son to me, but as a mother who has a son. And realizing that even though that's way too young for anybody to die, especially in the way that he died, given that he had a whole lifetime ahead of him, he still had this life. And so when I was creating my piece, I put together 25 strips for each year of his life, and I realized working on that by hand, that's actually a lot of life. And then I started thinking about stitch work is so methodical, and every stitch adds up. And so I thought about his life and all these little moments of a life. And so I thought about, his friends, and what if he had a pet and he had birthdays, and all the moments with his family, that every day is filled with so much life, all the details of a day. And then that becomes weeks and months of years of living. And so there are 25 years of just thousands upon thousands of moments in his life. And I don't know, I got very fixated on thinking about those things. And so my son, I traced him for this, so that's tracing of my son. So it was a way to connect with my son and think about Charlie as a young man, think about my son at that age, mid-20s, you're a young adult. Obviously I didn't know his mother, but I feel like it's this universal connection to anyone who's a parent. And yeah, so I thought a lot about that and the weight of that. And there are no words for a lot of those feelings. I feel like I got to help somebody's legacy be known. And I go back often thinking about how he was buried and his mother didn't know where he was. You know, I mean, he just disappeared off the face of the earth. And then he's buried and there was no, I imagine, resolution or so to be able to, you know, participate in one person's legacy in a positive way, as positive as it can be, felt really important.
We've come a long way to, I believe at this point, including every medium, both traditional and non-traditional mediums. We've had people that have used AI to help, you know, make art. We've had people that have done a dance performance. We kind of run the whole gambit of how to make art and what you can make in memorializing people, but really it's just us coming to the community, trying to address specific problems, and the community coming to us with the different skills they have. And then like we might have someone that has spent their whole life being immersed in like West African drum music, and that's what they're amazing at, and that's what they're beautiful at. And so that's what we want to uplift. We don't want them to then suddenly become a painter. Mm-hmm. We want them to do the thing that they're gifted to do. You know, there's other people that might be painters and traditional artists, but that's why it's important to have this network of former artists and current artists that we have to help younger artists and less established artists get trained.
One artist that comes to mind is like Victoria Coleman Jackson. Yeah. I mean, she was a writer before this, never made art, and has made some incredible pieces, has crocheted plastic bags in order to make, you know, first piece she made a face of her victim along with a poem next to it. Her second piece, she crocheted plastic bags to make snakes. And you know, she was calling it poisonisms, the poison of racism. You know, it's just great kind of seeing, because sometimes people may not have a background in art, and I think what we try to do, I mean, I'm of the belief everyone is an artist. It's just more so about having the courage to try something, to try to create. That's what we try to do, is just make it approachable to everyone and encourage people that, hey, you know, you've got something to say, especially probably about this topic. Let's give you the tools, let's give you the support system in order to say what you want to say.
The reason why we picked black cherry tree, first and foremost, because it's a native tree from Alabama, but we also picked it because of its symbolic weight, and also the symbolic weight that's already been associated with through Strange Fruit and Nina Simone and Billie Holiday's versions of that song, and the relations in that song specifically to lynching, to comparing like the hanging bodies on the trees to hanging fruit is a way of trying to transform a traumatic and negative image into something that can potentially bear new life, which is basically our third reason for having the black cherry trees. It's a fruiting plant, so if people eat it and, you know, nature happens, those seeds can end up growing again and sprouting more trees, and it becomes something where every person that eats a fruit is then spreading this tree that's growing, that's increasing, you know, the living conditions and health, and also providing, I a snack for future generations. So
Yeah. Ultimately, the tree is, like Noah said, we're taking a negative and trying to turn it positive without forgetting the negative. The tree brings back the harsh realities of lynching, people hanging from trees, the song Strange Fruit and its association with, like our intent behind using the black cherry tree is definitely a song that brings a lot of emotion. It was a song during the time, it had a huge impact on people at the time, and to speak about the horrors of lynching and bring attention to lynching, which is why this project exists. We're trying to, bring attention. The fact that it's a native Alabama tree, we're not introducing, a tree species that can't live in this community.
takes over, is
or
invasive.
take over, it's not something that's invasive. And, this is a Jefferson County, Alabama story right now. And I think as this project continues to grow, and when we expand to other states, we want to always make sure we're planting native trees in honor of the lynching victim, because there's a part in this that is rooted in nature as well, and making sure that the tree can be sustainable, because these trees are telling the story of the communities that they represent. This is a community-based initiative called the Jefferson County Memorial Quilt Project. It's in collaboration with Black Cherry Tree Project, Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, Bibb and Tucker SOAP, and Create Birmingham, and also Jefferson County Memorial Project. And what we do is we host different workshops across Birmingham at the different public libraries, and those workshops are for the public to create quilt squares to commemorate and honor the 33 documented lynching victims of Jefferson County. Those quilt squares are compiled into a larger quilt, which will be unveiled at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute in fall of 2025.
So one of the connections I made tonight is when Carrie was talking about the different forms of how lynching and racial violence shows up, and one of the things that caught my attention was the idea that also our death row is a form of both racial violence and a form of lynching. It's an organized, approved, invitational event that ends in a violent and horrifying death. And I think that's one of our most contemporary forms of lynching and of racial violence is our incarceration systems. They are not working in Alabama, and trying to keep that on the radar as we see innocent men like DeForest Johnson who are on death row, despite even the prosecuting attorney in his case calling for a retrial. I think that the more people can see inmates as people who are incarcerated, but they are not, that doesn't define the whole person. That helps tell the story. I think there are programs, we have a program called Books to Prison, where we're mailing books into men and women who are incarcerated in Alabama, and the letters we get back from them, people thanking us for their John Grisham book or their book on chicken farming, it shows people as the humans that they are.
What problem do you all hope that the Black Cherry Tree project will solve?
I mean, the problem of erasure, I think.
Well, entrenched white supremacy is what I believe our biggest enemy is, and what we're fighting, and why effectively Black Cherry Tree Project, at least right now, doesn't look like it'll ever end, is because we're fighting entrenched white supremacy. I know it's crazy seeing someone who looks like me say that, but we're trying to combat not just base level racism that people may be easily identified, maybe not, because we've seen a rise of hate groups and all these different crazy militant and fascist groups rise up all throughout the United States and the world. But it's also a moment right now where people are receptive to their own histories on the other side of the aisle. So we're really at the intersection between trying to avoid having the same issues happen again and again and again, and also uplifting and honoring people while we still have those stories to uplift and honor, because it is not long from now that we will lose these stories.
Yeah, we're showing why these conversations are important.
One really important thing that the Black Cherry Tree Project is doing is showing that these people weren't just victims, but that they were people and members of the community, that they had families, that they had careers, that they were human beings, and that they were human beings that something tragic happened to. And so Black Cherry Tree Project is doing a really great job at not only educating people, not only bringing humanity back to these individuals, but also honoring them in a way to where their legacy can live on beyond their lynching.